Hunter Callahan didn't expect his first night in the cabin to end with a shotgun pointed at his chest. "Who the hell are you, and why are you on my property?" The woman's voice was sharp, fierce, but her hands didn't shake. She looked like she'd shoot him without blinking. "I'm Hunter. I rented this place from a guy named Rick. Said it was the last one on the lake," Hunter said calmly, hands raised. "I didn't mean to trespass. I just went walking." The woman's eyes narrowed as she scanned him up and down. Her face was flushed from the cold, her auburn hair tucked into a knit beanie. Her jeans were muddy, boots scuffed, and there was a streak of dirt on her cheek. She looked like she belonged here, unlike him in his $1,000 boots and tailored coat. She stepped back slightly, lowering the shotgun but not relaxing. "Rick doesn't tell people there are neighbors. He said it was secluded. That's kind of why I'm here." She studied him again like she didn't believe a word. "I'm sorry," he added. "Honestly?" After a long pause, she sighed, resting the stock of the shotgun on her hip. "You're lucky I didn't call the sheriff. People don't just walk around out here." "Noted," he said with a small nod. "I'm not looking for trouble, just space." She tilted her head. "City guy having a crisis?" Hunter gave a short laugh. "Something like that." "Well, stay on your side of the trees, Hunter." She turned to leave, then added over her shoulder, "I'm Avery Tate. I live in the cabin past the ridge. Don't bother me and we'll get along fine." With that, she disappeared into the woods. Hunter stood in silence for a moment, breath clouding in the chilly dusk. So much for solitude. He hadn't come to the Montana wilderness expecting to meet anyone, especially not a sharp-tongued neighbor with a shotgun and no patience for city men. He'd taken the cabin to escape, to disappear. After years of boardrooms, luxury hotels, and fake smiles, he was done, burned out. And after the last headline about him and his ex-fiancée, he'd needed to get lost. No one out here knew who he was. No one cared that he ran one of the most successful real estate investment firms in New York, or that he was worth more than $100 million. That was the point. But now there was Avery. And something about her, maybe the fire in her eyes, maybe the way she didn't flinch, hit him harder than it should have. The next morning, Hunter chopped wood behind the cabin, muscles aching in the best possible way. There was a knock on the door around noon. When he opened it, Avery stood there with 2 mugs and a cardboard box. "You drink coffee, or are you one of those green juice types?" she asked, handing him a steaming cup before he could answer. He took it, surprised. "Coffee, definitely." "Good, I brought cinnamon rolls too." "I made too many," he raised an eyebrow. "Are you always this generous to trespassers?" She gave him a look. "Don't push it." Inside, they sat across from each other at the small table, the fire crackling in the stove. "So," she said, biting into a roll. "What's your story, city guy?" Hunter leaned back. "Do you want the fake version or the real one?" Avery shrugged. "Try me. I built a company from the ground up, made a lot of money, lost someone I thought I'd marry, got tired of people wanting me for what I could give them. So I left." She was quiet for a moment. "That's the real version?" "Close enough," she nodded. "Well, this place doesn't care who you are, neither do I." That was the first time in years someone had said that to him and meant it. They ended up talking for 2 hours. Over the next week, Hunter found himself running into Avery more often than he planned. Once when she was trying to fix her generator and swearing under her breath. Another time when he was on the trail and she was hauling firewood with her truck. She never asked about his life in New York. Never pried. She treated him like a human being, not a wallet. It was refreshing, and she wasn't just tough. She was funny too, witty, clever. The kind of woman who didn't need saving but would still have your back if everything went wrong. One evening, snow started falling hard. Hunter was on his porch when headlights cut through the trees. Avery's truck pulled up and she jumped out in a thick coat and beanie. "I brought food," she said, holding up a foil-covered tray. "Didn't want you starving." He opened the door, letting her in. "You didn't have to. You say that like I listen to people." Inside, they sat by the fire again. She'd made stew and cornbread, and it was better than anything he'd eaten in months. "Can I ask you something?" she said suddenly, setting her bowl down. "Sure, why this place?" "You could have picked anywhere." Hunter stared into the flames for a second. Because it's quiet, real, no noise, no expectations. I needed to remember who I was before all the success. You're still that guy, you know, Avery said softly. He looked at her. Her eyes were steady, warm. You don't even know who that guy is. I'm figuring it out. The tension between them simmered, unspoken but undeniable. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. You're not what I expected out here. Neither are you, she whispered, and then he kissed her. It was slow, intense, the kind of kiss that said this wasn't just a spark, it was the beginning of something they didn't see coming. When they pulled apart, Avery rested her forehead against his. This is a bad idea, she murmured. Yeah, he said. But I don't care. Neither of them said anything else. They just sat there, close, while the snow kept falling. Hunter hadn't come to the cabin looking for love, but maybe love had found him anyway. The wind had shifted overnight, bringing in a bitter cold that scraped against the windows and howled through the pine trees. Hunter stepped outside early, the air biting at his face, and saw Avery already near the edge of the ridge, a long-handled axe in her hands, splitting logs with precise, fluid swings. He didn't call out. He just watched for a moment. She moved like she'd done it her whole life, no hesitation, no wasted energy. When she noticed him, she rested the axe against the stump and pulled off one glove. You ever split wood that wasn't delivered by a man named Serge in a linen uniform? Hunter gave her a slow grin. I think I'd remember Serge, she raised an eyebrow. Then congratulations, you're about to earn your breakfast. He rolled up his sleeves without another word. By mid-morning, they had a neat stack of firewood and 2 pairs of blistered hands. Avery washed up at the outdoor spigot while Hunter poured coffee into battered tin mugs. You've got a scar on your hand, he said, nodding to the thin white line across her knuckles. Barbed wire fence. I was 12. Thought I could outrun a bull, he blinked. You couldn't. I could, she smiled faintly. Didn't see the fence, he laughed, the sound easy and full. You're something else. She leaned against the porch railing, blowing on her coffee. You say that like you've met a lot of ranch girls. I haven't met anyone like you, he said simply. She didn't answer. Just looked out across the snow-covered trees, the silence stretching between them. It wasn't awkward. It was just full. Later that day, Hunter returned to his cabin to find a folded note tucked beneath a stone on his steps. Avery's handwriting was brisk and slanted. Storm's coming. If you're smart, you'll stock up. Don't trust the generator, and if the chimney's not been cleaned, don't light a fire too high. He traced the ink with his thumb. No greeting, no signature, just her looking out for him in her own way. That night, the sky cracked open. Snow fell in thick, heavy sheets, and the wind shrieked like it was trying to rip the forest apart. Hunter lay awake, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the ceiling while the walls creaked. Sometime past midnight, there was a pounding on the door. He opened it to find Avery soaked to the skin, her jacket frozen at the edges, cheeks raw from wind. My power's out, she said, breathless. And the chimney's backed up. I can't get a fire going. He didn't hesitate. Come in. She peeled off her coat and boots, leaving puddles on the wood floor. Her hands were trembling, not from fear but the cold. Hunter grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. You walked all the way here. My truck's buried. And I wasn't about to freeze waiting for morning. He led her to the fire, adding another log, careful not to push it too high. She sat close, holding out her hands. He went to the small kitchen, poured her whiskey, and handed it over. She took a sip. You're not what I expected either. He leaned against the counter. What did you expect? Someone softer, someone who'd be calling for a helicopter by now. Hunter gave a low laugh. And ruin the view, she looked up, eyes catching his. Why are you really here, Hunter? He considered lying. Dodging, but she'd never let him get away with it. I lost myself, he said finally. I spent years chasing things that didn't matter. The money came fast, the success even faster. And somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing the guy in the mirror. Avery's gaze didn't waver. So you came out here to remember? I came out here to see if there was anything left to remember. She set her glass down. There is. They didn't sleep that night. They talked until the fire burned low. She told him about her sister who moved to Portland and never looked back. About her father who taught her how to fix engines before she could legally drive. About the first time she saw a calf born in a spring storm and thought it was the closest thing to a miracle she'd ever witnessed. And he told her what it felt like to sign deals worth millions and still go home to an empty penthouse. About the weight of having everything and feeling nothing. As the sky paled with the first hint of morning, Avery rested her head on his shoulder. "I wasn't planning on anyone being here this winter," she said quietly. "Neither was I." She looked up at him, eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. "But you're not staying." It wasn't a question. He didn't answer right away. "I haven't figured that out yet." She nodded, like she understood more than he'd said. When she finally fell asleep beside him on the couch, Hunter didn't move. He watched the snow fall through the window and realized something he hadn't admitted until now. He didn't want to go back. Not to the boardrooms, not to the headlines, not to being the man everyone wanted something from. He wanted this, the quiet, the fire. The woman asleep at his side who saw right through him and didn't flinch, but wanting it didn't make it his. And as the storm raged on outside, Hunter realized the real battle wasn't between him and the world he'd left behind. It was between the man he'd become and the one Avery had stirred awake. Hunter hadn't touched his phone in 4 days. That morning, he powered it on only long enough to see a flood of missed calls and texts from his assistant, a few from his attorney, and one from a name that made his jaw tighten. He powered it off again before the notifications could finish loading. Outside, the snow had packed down into a thick crust, and the sky had cleared. Sunlight glittered across the frozen trees like glass. Avery was already up the hill when he spotted her through the frost-lined window, pulling a sled behind her loaded with supplies, bags of feed, a battered toolbox, and a crate filled with canning jars that clinked with every step. "You planning to rebuild civilization up there?" he asked as he caught up with her. "Something like that," she said, not slowing. "Supplies come in once a week. I missed the last run when my truck got trapped, so I bartered with the couple down the valley. They had extra. I had a generator part they needed. You trade mechanical parts like most people trade sugar. Out here, sugar won't fix a busted pump." She stopped suddenly and looked at him. "Can you carry the crate? My shoulder's still not great." He picked it up without a word. They walked side by side for a while, the only sounds the crunch of boots over snow and the distant call of a bird overhead. "Didn't peg you as someone who bartered like it was the Old West," he said after a while. Avery adjusted the strap of her bag. "I don't rely on what I can't control. If the road's close or the power cuts, I need to know I can feed myself." Hunter studied her profile, the way her jaw set with quiet determination. "That sounds lonely. Maybe, but it's honest. People can't pretend out here. They either show up or they don't." He didn't answer. The truth of it hit harder than he expected. In his world, showing up meant private chefs, assistants who answered your calls, and business partners who'd smile to your face while plotting your replacement. Here, it meant dragging a sled through 3 feet of snow because someone else needed help. Once they reached her cabin, she opened the door and let him inside. The place was warm, smaller than his, but lived in a way that made it feel like more than shelter. A line of boots by the door, half-worn gloves on a hook, a chipped mug holding paintbrushes on the windowsill. "Didn't know you painted," he said, nodding to the brushes. "I don't talk about it. I do it when I can't sleep." "What do you paint?" She hesitated before answering. "Places I've never been, cities, crowded streets." "Rooftops? That surprises me. I like imagining what I'd hate," she said wryly. "Makes me grateful for where I am." Hunter set the crate on the table. "You'd hate New York. I already do. Too much noise, too many people pretending they're not falling apart." He moved closer. "And what about people who came out here because they were falling apart?" She met his gaze. "Depends if they start pretending again when they go back." "I'm not sure I want to go back." Avery's eyes flicked away. "You will. You have a life there, a business. People who depend on you. People who want things from me, he corrected. Silence settled again. Then she turned, pulling jars from the crate. You should learn how to preserve food, she said. It's not glamorous, but it's useful. He stepped beside her, rolling up his sleeves. Teach me? For the next hour, she showed him how to sterilize the jars, how to pack them with vegetables she'd pickled weeks ago, how to heat the lids just right for sealing. Her hands moved confidently, explaining each step without overthinking it. Your father teach you this? He asked as he tightened the last lid. No, my mom did, before she got sick. He paused. I didn't know. I don't talk about her often. She passed a few winters back. Cancer, quick but brutal. Hunter didn't say he was sorry. She didn't need that. Instead, he reached across the counter and rested his hand over hers. I lost someone too, not to illness, just to ambition. Avery didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in either. That's the problem with ambition. It doesn't keep you warm in January. Later, as dusk settled over the cabin, she walked him back to the ridge. The snow had softened, the wind died down, and the sky turned a deep violet. Do you miss it? She asked suddenly as they stopped near the line of pines. What? The version of you who fit in skyscrapers and corner offices, he thought for a long moment. I miss the illusion of control, but not the man I became under it. She nodded once, then stepped back. You should get inside before your fire dies. He started to turn, then stopped. Come over tomorrow night, I'll cook. Avery laughed softly. You know how to cook. I know how to read instructions. It's practically the same thing. She gave him a look, but didn't say no. That night, Hunter stood at his window long after the fire had burned low, watching the faint light from her cabin flicker in the distance. He didn't know what was happening between them. It wasn't defined and it wasn't safe, but it was real, and for once, that was enough. Except the next morning, something changed. Avery didn't show up, not for breakfast, not after lunch. Not even at dusk. By nightfall, the knot in Hunter's chest had tightened into something darker. He grabbed his coat, threw on gloves, and headed for her cabin. The windows were dark. He knocked, waited, then pushed the door open. It wasn't locked. Inside, the heat was gone, the fire was out. Her boots were missing on the table, a single note, gone to check on the Thompsons. Should be back by nightfall, if not, wait until morning, but morning had come and gone. Hunter grabbed the flashlight, strapped on his snowshoes, and headed into the woods. Because waiting wasn't an option, not anymore. Hunter pushed through the snow-soaked underbrush, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness like a blade. The cold bit deeper the farther he climbed, but he didn't stop. Avery had been gone too long. The Thompsons' cabin was nearly 2 miles over the ridge, and there'd been no sign of her since yesterday. He knew the trail by now, but in the dark, every tree looked the same. Still, his boots kept moving. The thought of something happening to her out here, some accident, some misstep, tightened in his chest like a vice. Halfway up the incline, he spotted it, a faint flicker of light ahead. He followed it until the trees parted, revealing a snowed-in cabin with a lantern glowing weakly in the front window. The Thompsons' place. But no smoke from the chimney. Hunter knocked, then opened the door slowly. Avery, she was there curled on the floor beside a makeshift fire in the hearth, wrapped in a heavy quilt. Her face was pale, her breath shallow. Relief slammed into him so hard he nearly dropped to his knees. You're freezing, he said, kneeling beside her. I couldn't leave, she whispered. The Thompsons, both of them, got sick. Fever, I stayed. Hunter glanced around. 2 figures lay in the back room, bundled in blankets. They were breathing, but barely. You should have sent for me. I didn't want you risking this trail at night, she rasped. You think I'd stay home knowing you were out here? She didn't answer. Her eyes fluttered closed. He wrapped her tighter in the quilt and scooped her into his arms. I'm getting you back to the cabin. Then I'll come back for them. She didn't argue. It took nearly an hour to get her home. The wind had picked up again, and the snow was starting to fall hard in patches. By the time he got her inside, his jacket was soaked and her skin was ice cold. He stoked the fire until it roared, laid her gently on the couch, covered her in every blanket he could find. Her eyes opened slowly. I smell whiskey, she whispered. I poured it for you. You're drinking it. She took a small sip, her lips trembling. You carried me all the way down. You'd have done the same. Her gaze met his. You shouldn't have come. I didn't have a choice. He sat beside her, pressing her hands between his. They were still cold, but warming. We'll get a doctor up to the Thompsons tomorrow. I'll call in a snowmobile or whatever the hell it takes. You'll have to go back into town for that. I'll do it. She studied him for a long moment. You're not the same man who walked into these woods. He didn't look away. I hope not. Avery leaned back, her breathing steadier now. I've never had anyone come looking for me like that. You shouldn't have to ask. The air between them shifted, something unspoken finally clicking into place. I need to tell you something, he said. Before anything else happens, her brows drew together. He stood and paced once before stopping in front of her. My name is Hunter Callahan. I own Callahan Holdings. I'm not just some guy who burned out and disappeared. I built an empire, Avery, and I walked away from it because I didn't like who I became. She stared at him, unmoving. I didn't lie, he added quickly. I just didn't explain. I wanted to be seen for who I am without the money, the titles, the press. I figured you had money, she said softly. You've got the boots of a man who doesn't shop in hardware stores. He gave a dry laugh. That obvious? Only to someone who knows what it's like to count every dollar. She sat up, the blanket pooling around her waist. So what now? Are you going back to it? He crossed the room and knelt in front of her. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I don't want that world if you're not in it. You think I'd fit into that? Manhattan penthouses and black tie dinners? No, he said. I think I'd rather build something new with you, something real. Something like this, her eyes searched his. You'd walk away from all of it, I already did, but now I'd have a reason to stay gone. She touched his face, her fingers warm now. You've got a hell of a way of confessing things. I'm not good at subtle. Good, she whispered. Because I don't want subtle. He kissed her slow and deep, not like the first time in front of the fire, but with the full weight of everything they hadn't said. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead to his. You're a pain in the ass, Hunter Callahan. You make it worth it. The next morning, he hiked back to the Thompsons and found them sitting up, weak but lucid. He used the satellite phone to call in medical assistance from the town. By afternoon, a snowmobile arrived with supplies and a medic. The Thompsons were transported back safely. Hunter returned to Avery's cabin just before dusk. She was standing outside, arms crossed, watching the clouds roll in again. They made it, he said. She nodded. You really did all that? I did, and I was thinking, maybe I stick around longer. Fix up one of the old ranch houses. Start a little something here. She looked at him carefully. You'd trade boardrooms for barns, if it means waking up next to you? Yes, she didn't cry, she didn't laugh. She just stepped forward and kissed him again, deep, certain, claiming. Later that week, she took him to a stretch of land overlooking the lake. It's been empty for years, she said. No one wants to build this far out. I do. By spring, construction had started. Not a mansion, just a strong, sunlit cabin with a wide porch and windows that faced the trees. Hunter never returned to his office in Manhattan. Instead, he filed the papers to transfer control. He kept the company, but from afar, on his terms. Avery's paintings shifted. Less of cities. More of sunrises and wood smoke and the curve of a man's shoulder asleep on her couch. They didn't rush anything. But they didn't waste time either. By the time the first leaves turned gold again, Hunter stood on that same ridge, Avery's hand in his, as a local judge read the vows they'd written beside the lake. He didn't need a tuxedo or a ballroom, just her. And when she whispered, "You found me when I didn't know I was lost," he pulled her close and said, "You made me remember who I was and who I want to be." The wind was still sharp that day, but the fire between them never faltered, and neither of them ever walked away again. Avery sat cross-legged on the porch of their half-finished cabin, a hammer resting beside her and a streak of sawdust across her cheek. The sun was dipping below the ridge in slow, golden strokes, and her eyes followed the shape of Hunter's back as he talked with the contractor near the clearing. She didn't hear what they were saying, but it didn't matter. She wasn't watching for information, just to see how he moved now, with shoulders looser, steps more grounded, like the weight that had once bent him had finally lifted. When he turned and caught her looking, he gave her a nod that meant, "I'll be there in a minute." She nodded back. They hadn't talked about the future in specifics since the wedding. Not because they were avoiding it, but because they were living too deeply in the present to rush toward anything else. But as she sat there, the breeze curling around her legs, she realized something had been building in her chest for days now, something she hadn't said out loud. She stood and brushed off her jeans just as Hunter walked up the porch steps. "They'll finish the roof by Wednesday," he said. "After that, we're good to move in." Avery tilted her head. "You still want that wraparound porch?" "I want everything we planned." She leaned against the post, arms crossed. "Even the wildflower garden that's probably going to get eaten by deer." He reached for her hand. "Especially that." She studied his face. "Have you thought about what comes after?" He stepped closer. "Tell me what you're thinking." "I want to open the art studio." He blinked once, then smiled. "Yeah. There's that old barn behind the community center. It's falling apart, but the bones are good. I was thinking, maybe I fix it up. Offer classes, maybe even get some of the local kids interested." His hand tightened around hers. "I didn't know you were still painting." "I hadn't picked up a brush in months, but last week I started again." "I think I stopped waiting for permission." He touched her cheek, the calloused pad of his thumb brushing the edge of her jaw. "You never needed it." She hesitated, then said, "And there's something else." Hunter waited, patient. "I want kids, not right this second, but I want that. With you." He didn't flinch, he didn't joke, he just stepped even closer and rested his forehead against hers. "I think about it all the time," he whispered. "You, me, a home that doesn't echo." She swallowed hard. "You don't miss it, the skyline. The pace. I only ever missed feeling like I belonged, and I found that here, with you." Avery closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words settle into her like roots. When she opened them again, he was still closed, still solid, still hers. "I started sketching the nursery," she said quietly. He pulled back just enough to look at her directly. "Really, just ideas. I was thinking soft green walls, a hand-painted mural, nothing fancy." "I'll build the crib." She laughed then, a soft, surprised sound. "You sure you trust yourself with that?" "I'll get help," he said, grinning. "But I want to, every piece of it." That night, they lay on a mattress near the fireplace, the stars scattering across the ceiling through the open rafters. The windows still had no glass. The walls were half insulated, but it felt more like home than any place either of them had known. "Do you remember what you said to me that night the storm hit?" she asked, her head on his chest. "I remember everything from that night. You said you didn't want to go back, that you weren't sure who you were anymore." He turned to face her, brushing a strand of hair from her collarbone. "I know exactly who I am now. And who's that? I'm the man who shows up, who knows what matters, who wakes up every day knowing he chose the right thing." Avery traced the line of his jaw with her fingertip. "You're also the man who can't cook without setting off the smoke alarm. Some things never change." They laughed together, warm and tangled beneath the blankets, the wind whispering through the trees outside. By spring, the cabin was complete. The garden was already sprouting wildflowers in uneven patches. The studio had been cleared, beams reinforced, and a sign hung over the front, "Tate Studio & Co." Inside, Avery taught her first class to 5 children from the neighboring farms. They left with paint on their shirts and wide-eyed stories to tell their parents. Hunter spent his mornings repairing fences and learning how to work the land. In the evenings, he'd bring Avery lemonade while she sketched on the porch. He never returned to the city, not even for meetings. His company ran from afar now, and he only checked in when absolutely necessary. They had dinner with the Thompsons once a week, who had fully recovered and now insisted on trading honey for firewood. Holidays were spent with neighbors around bonfires, where Avery's pies were always the first to vanish. One summer evening, as they watched the sun sink over the lake, Avery reached for his hand and placed it over her stomach. "You're going to be a father," she said, voice low. Hunter went still. Then he looked at her, really looked, as if memorizing her all over again. "I already feel like I am," he said softly, "but hearing you say it, I don't think I've ever been this happy." She leaned into him, heart full. Years passed, but the fire between them never dulled. Their daughter was born in late winter, her cry strong and insistent. Hunter held her like she was made of gold, and Avery painted her first portrait before she could walk. They built a life out of wood and wind, laughter and love, a life that didn't need skyscrapers or luxury to feel rich. And every evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Hunter would wrap his arm around Avery's waist, pull her close, and whisper the same words into her hair. "Thank you for finding me. For loving me before I knew how to love myself." And every time she'd smile and answer, "You came all this way to forget who you were. But you ended up becoming exactly who you were meant to be." Together, they lived in the kind of love that didn't fade, it deepened, year after year, until nothing else mattered but the way they looked at each other across a crowded room, a quiet porch, or a field of wildflowers in bloom.